Everybody is talking about the importance of sustainability and, in particular, in the world of architecture, sustainable building design. But have you taken a moment to consider how sustainable your website is? Did you even realise that websites have a carbon footprint too? And do you have any idea how sustainable your own website is? I'm joined by Molly Scanlan to learn how to make your digital presence more sustainable while still looking great in this episode of Architecture Business Club, the weekly podcast for small firm founders who want to build their dream business in architecture and enjoy more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment in what they do. I'm John Clayton, your host. I know that building an architecture business can feel hard, especially if you're a sole practitioner. The good news is that you don't have to do it alone. Last year, we launched our membership community to a small group of founding members, including architects, architectural technologists and interior designers. We meet online each week and occasionally in person to support each other in building our businesses and to have some fun along the way. On the 1st of March 2025, we open the doors to a limited number of new members. If you'd like to join this supportive group of like-minded professionals, now's your chance. Just go to architecturebusinessclub.com/waitlist or click the link in the show notes and enter your details so I can let you know how you can join this incredible group. And if you have any questions, just email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com. Now let's find out how to reduce your digital carbon footprint. Molly Scanlan builds low-carbon websites for social enterprises and non-evil businesses. She started her first business at 21, put in a valiant stint as a primary school teacher, and is now a freelance web designer, developer, writer, and event speaker. Molly is a frequent podcast guest talking about sustainability and small business and sharing her twisting career story. For a useful tip for your business and something else random but equally interesting, sign up for Molly's super short weekly email at mollygetsitdone.com/sign up. Molly, welcome to Architecture Business Club. Could you tell me a bit about what you like to get up to in your free time when you're not designing sustainable websites?
Well, I have a 7-year-old, so there's not much free time, but recently I've been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack on repeat, and there are so many business lessons in there. So I've been making videos for LinkedIn, just sharing some of the wisdom that weirdly a musical about a founding father has for freelancers and small businesses.
Oh, that's so cool. I've heard it's an amazing show. I've not actually been to see it yet, but you've been to see it, have you? More than once?
Yeah. No, it's really expensive. I've seen it in the West End once, and then I've watched it on Disney Plus, and then it was my Spotify Wrapped last year was basically just the soundtrack album and one other song.
My Spotify Wrapped last year was basically Judas Priest. I wouldn't say I'm like a mega fan, but I think I sort of discovered they're ancient bands. They've been going for like 50 years. But I just sort of got into them last year. And then that was like, the thing that I was just listening to on Spotify all the time. So a bit different, the Hamilton soundtrack, I would imagine. But,
It's sometimes just indicative of what was going on in your life. So the Spotify Wrapped from when my son was under 1 was like just a white noise track, like a 10-hour white noise. Best song ever.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to talk about sustainable websites today so that we can all learn how to lower our digital carbon footprint and be a bit kinder to the planet. I guess the best place to start, though, would be by asking, what is a sustainable website?
Great question. I guess, like any other sustainable thing, it does the job that we want it to do, but at the same time, actively trying to minimize any harmful effects on the planet and on the people who are using it and the people who are not using it. Everyone in the world shouldn't be negatively affected by your product, ideally. So that's it. Yeah.
That's interesting, though, because I can imagine that there are people listening thinking, like, is that even a thing? Could my website be, creating a horrendous carbon footprint? I imagine there's a lot of people that are listening that have just, this is a totally alien thing. We all heard about sustainability and, looking after the environment, but not necessarily in the context of our websites, which was the main reason why I really wanted to have this conversation with you and to share that with the listeners. One of the things that you talk a lot about is digital footprint. What do you mean when you say digital footprint? What exactly is that?
Yeah, so I do feel a bit like a harbinger of doom sometimes when people ask what I do and I say, and then they say, oh, I didn't realize, digital stuff had a footprint. And I have to be like, I'm so sorry, here's something else to feel guilty about. You've been refilling your shampoo and then I shot down the road and thought everything was fine. But yeah, I mean, carbon footprint in general is a bit of a problematic term because it was actually originally sort of coined by the big oil companies to kind of shift the onus onto the individual to do something rather than let people remembering about the massive systemic change that kind of needs to happen. But just as a kind of shorthand for how can we minimize any negative impact on the planet, is how I end up using it, because that's sort of how we've ended up using it in sort of common speech. But yeah, sorry, your website isn't invisible because it's on a computer and digital. It's stored in massive stacks of computers in huge warehouses that take a lot of electricity to run them and a lot of energy and water, weirdly, to cool them all down. You know how your computer gets hot when you've been using it, especially older computers. But yeah, those data centers use all of that, and they're full of all the rubbish that we've put on the internet. So every photo you've ever taken of mediocre dinners, every email you've got in your inbox, all those Canva files that are just there that you've forgotten that you're not using, just everything that's in the cloud is in a hot building. So that's how your website does have an impact, because the energy that is used to store it and to deliver it to people's devices, that it takes energy, and the way we create a lot of our energy is not from renewable sources currently.
Wow, this is quite shocking, and I'm already starting to feel guilty after listening to that, Molly. I'm thinking about the various accounts that I have online where there are files and graphics and photos that
the forgotten Dropbox. I've got one of those.
Yeah, the forgotten Dropbox and my email as well. That, I mean, I guess this extends as far as that as well. That presumably things like email, like if we send an email that we have to have a computer at one end and then it goes via various other computers and data centers to get to the computer at the other end. So presumably even that act of writing and sending an email or signing up to somebody's newsletter, that in itself, like if we've got lots of emails coming in and out of our inboxes, that presumably as well, that there's a digital carbon footprint associated with that.
Yeah. The emails aren't nowhere. They are just, files being stored and shunted around. Yes, every time you just email back, thanks, to a big long thread, it's sending all of that information from the previous 48 messages and just the word thanks. And if someone's got, a big email signature with a big picture on, it's shifting that over as well. But, we love email. You've simply got to be on email nowadays. It's a great way to send messages, but I guess like everything else, just mindful of how you use it. Like, don't send that email that only has one word in if you don't really need to. Go through and delete old ones. Don't send loads of files back and forth if you don't absolutely have to. That's a nice little quick win that you can do in your emails, is like just search for something where you've got loads of rubbish there. Like in your personal emails, you just search for Sainsbury's, and there's probably about 20 emails confirming your delivery for food that you ate 3 years ago. You can just delete those. So, or if you've got newsletters that you never read, or something where you can search for a particular term and it'll just bring you up a page of emails you're never going to read again and just delete the whole lot. So that's a nice little 5-minute sustainability win. And it's tiny marginal gains. The actual energy it takes to send one email is really tiny, but if you're sending X number every day and then billions of us are doing it every day, it does add up.
Well, this nicely segues onto my next question, which was to ask about how we can lower our digital footprint. Do you have some more suggestions about how we could lower our digital footprint?
Yeah, so as far as your website goes, the number one thing that you can do to have an impact is about where you choose to host it. So the big hot data centers we were talking about, more and more of them are being, or hopefully, I need to check on the stats on that, but are being powered by renewables. You know, it's great to have a massive, ugly cuboid building because you can cover the roof in solar panels or wind turbines. Don't know, some of them, they're too heavy to go on the roof probably. But yeah, so a host that actually is using renewable energy to power all the computers, and that is then efficiently using that. So the water that is in the cooling system can be reused only a finite number of times. Sort of weirdly, it gets all ionized and weird, and you can't send it back out after it's been through about 4 times. But up to however many times it is, you can reuse it. So certain data centers are just being as efficient as possible using renewable energy. And so if you don't make any changes to your website, but you host it with one of those hosts instead of and the one that's, you know, not particularly efficient and run on fossil fuels, you've immediately massively reduced the impact without having, I mean, sometimes it's a faff to move host, but not really. Not the same as redesigning your whole site or something. So yeah, that's the number one thing you can do. And then once it's being hosted there, it's just about making the actual file size of the whole website as small as possible. So if you think about it from the design stage or you're auditing your site, first thing to do is what is, a bit like deleting emails, what is nobody reading and doesn't have an impact on our business and is this whole page needed? Delete. Cut out all the fluff and waffle and things you don't need, or a page about an event that happened 5 years ago. It can go. And it's just, the good thing is that a lot of these things to do with reducing the footprint overlap with just making your website better. So if you've cut out all the fluff and waffle and just have those key pages that people actually need the information from and make the information really clear, it's way better for your, you know, user experience and conversions and all those sorts of things which actually affect the sort of bottom line of the business. Yeah, so that would be that. And then, yeah, I often talk about it as like, you know, Marie Kondo, that magic of the art of tidying up. So like each bit of your website, does it spark joy or does it help with what the goal of your website is, whether that's sort of sales, inquiries, or sign-ups to something. And if something's not pulling its literal weight on the page, get it off. Like that stock photograph of 2 businessmen shaking hands. Is that, you know, is that driving conversions, or is it just there because there was a gap and it felt like it should go there? Take it out. And yeah, and another one is having a really good knowledge of your user journey and setting up your, you know, navigation menu and all your buttons to guide people through really well. Because if they can get to where they need to be in 3 clicks instead of 6 clicks, you've halved the footprint just because they've been to less pages. So it's kind of having that sustainability, but also kind of best practice efficiency in all areas sort of goggles on when you're making all those decisions.
It sounds like there's a lot of other benefits that come from this. Is like this approach of, it's a less is more approach, isn't it? Where we're looking at sort of clarity over quantity where our website is concerned. So it means that the pages that we have, the images that we have, the text that we have, all of it has to matter. It has to get to the point. And yeah.
It's minimalism. What people think when you say minimalism, you mean just like a blank white cube or something, but it actually means it's just the very sort of minimum you need to get to where you need to go. So yeah, sort of nice leanness. It doesn't mean it has to be boring and plain. It can be exciting and colourful and have loads of, interesting stuff on it, but none of that stuff is pointless.
That's interesting, because I can imagine that is a common misconception about sustainable websites. What other common misconceptions or myths do you think there are when concerning sustainable websites?
I think that's probably the main one. It's probably the last few years it's got different, but I think historically kind of things that are environmentally friendly were often a bit sort of brown and hand woven. Just, like some shonky woman's made it in her kitchen in Glastonbury or whatever. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Just a bit of a sort of a kind of worthy, whole grainy kind of approach or a look to things. But it doesn't, like I say, it just means you've hosted it somewhere green, and then you've been really efficient with your design. And then there's, techie stuff about how you serve up images and things like that. But that's it. The actual content of the website doesn't need to be anything. Whatever style or branding you have, you can still have that. You're just presenting it more efficiently.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. Why do you think that architecture practices in particular might want to have a sustainable website?
Well, it's obviously a big, not buzzword because that makes it sound so shallow, but it's obviously a big thing in the building industry at the moment that hopefully and presumably most firms are thinking about sustainability and, how they, designing the buildings, the actual building process, the materials, how that building is using energy and conserving energy or producing energy. All the kind of that's really making a big impact in our physical built environment. Those kind of things are being talked about and focused on and specialized in and kind of driven towards. So I guess if that's what your practice is talking about and having as a kind of business value, then it should run through everything that you're doing, and that comes with your business as well. So as well as the buildings that they're designing and getting built, then what about your office? What about how your people run your business and your website? If you sort of, walking the walk as well as talking the talk, I guess. Making tweaks to your website might be a smaller impact than designing a building that's got really good sort of solar panel integration. But I think it should all be part of that same picture.
I agree. I think that if you're a practice that's got a focus on sustainability, which more and more practices have these days, that's one of their values, that it should carry through for the rest of the business. That be an irony there, wouldn't there, if they've got we're all about sustainability, but then we've got this really bloated website or business practices generally that are just very unkind to the planet. That just doesn't seem right, really, does it? So I think in terms of helping to improve their sustainability credentials and that carrying through the rest of the way that they run their business, that it totally makes sense that they would have a sustainable website as well. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and you are a practice that has a focus on sustainability, this would be a great time to take a look at your own website and to reconsider whether or not that we need to trim it down, make it a bit leaner, make it a bit more efficient, maybe change the hosting platform for an easy sustainability win. Definitely worth considering.
Yeah, and I suppose with your sort of I'm a good person hat on, then it makes sense to have the website be sustainable if your practice focuses on sustainability, but also with your kind of cynical business hat on, presumably the clients that you're working with value sustainability, and that might be part of the reason why they've chosen you. So if you are properly having sustainability as a priority through the whole of your business, it just gives you more credibility, and they'll be more willing to kind of, know, like, and trust you, and choose you to give them loads of money to. So whichever way it is, the right thing to do. But there is also, it makes sense from a business point of view as well.
Are there any other benefits or advantages for small businesses generally from having a sustainable website?
Yeah, well, as I said, it kind of overlaps. If you're designing with that in mind, you're naturally designing with better user experience and efficiency in mind. But that also will help with SEO, because search engines like fast websites, and the kind of lighter, leaner websites are generally faster. And also the sort of even the words that you've got on your website, because if they're really focused on your target client and giving the right information, it'll help the customer get to where they need to be, but it also make things really clear to search engines what your website is about, and they like that. Not to personify them or anything, but that helps them to categorize and then to, prioritize you in the rankings. So yeah, there's the SEO benefit as well.
Well, that's very important where websites are concerned, for sure. How can we find the right balance with the website? And I'm thinking that particularly if it's a website in architecture where often they can be quite image heavy with photos, maybe videos on the site as well. So to try and find that right balance between it being sustainable and attractive still, how do you think we can do that? How can we find that balance? Remember, don't forget to join the waitlist for our membership community, where you can meet other business owners who want the same thing as you. A thriving business that gives you more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment. Just go to architecturebusinessclub.com/waitlist or click the link in the show notes and enter your details so you don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to improve your business and your life. And if you're enjoying the show, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, because as you said, videos and photos often are the things that are contributing the most weight to a page, by which I mean the file size of the page and therefore the amount of energy it takes to store and deliver. So yeah, it's an interesting one. That's why I wanted to come on the podcast as well, because, my website, I've got about 3-5 photos on the whole thing. So it's really, really efficient and light, and sort of, the design is kind of structured around text. But if you're any kind of, architecture firm or a designer, it's a visual thing, a visual job, and people are going to buy from you when they connect with the visuals. So, yeah, it is about that balancing act. And it doesn't, if you're trying to be more sustainable, it doesn't mean that is always your number one priority and that you're ruthlessly pursuing that at the expense of everything else, because it's a business. So it has to intersect with the business goals. If you're being really sustainable, most businesses should just close. That would be the most sustainable thing they could do. But then no one can pay their mortgage, so everyone's a bit stuck. So short of that, it is about balancing the goals. If you think about, a product-based business, the very most sustainable thing they could do might be that people cycle to their shop and refill the product in their own container and take it home. But that might not be how your business works, and you have to deliver the products. So you're like, we can't do that very most sustainable thing, but we can use cardboard packaging that's really easily recyclable at the curbside. So it's trying to figure out how to serve the business goals in the most sustainable way possible. So you need lots of great photos of your work on your architecture website. You do. But do you need, for each project, do you need 50 photos on there, or could you have 10? And once you've chosen those photos that actually are going to have the most impact, you can then put them at the correct size, and there's various sort of more technical stuff you can do that mean they're compressed and served more efficiently. And yeah, people really connect with video. It's the sort of well-known marketing thing that videos are really in all walks of business, but they're so chunky. So again, it's about where can I deploy this video that it's going to have the most impact? Does every project that we're showcasing on our website need a video? Or if they all have a video, do we need to have 10 in our portfolio on the website? Or is it the 5 most impactful? It's these kind of decisions. And then you can, there are ways of sort of serving up the video. My one thing I would say is having an auto-playing video on the top of your homepage, just take that off because they're so massive and anything auto-playing is big. And when people land on a homepage, that's why you have to try and make that top bit really grab people, because people scroll after a second, less than a second. So most of the time, the video won't have even got going by the time they've already moved on. But in the meantime, it's taken all that energy to load up, and it looks very shiny and it looks very architecty, websitey, but it's probably not worth it in terms of the energy it takes and whether people actually look at it.
Yeah, so that's a quick win there, isn't it? By removing that sort of video banner. And I think really the thing you mentioned about like the case studies, the photos and the videos, that I guess it's about focusing on, again, the quality over the quantity. So it'd be better to have maybe 3 free videos that are really, really good rather than having like 20, or the same with the photos as well. Like, do we need to have a gazillion and one photos just because at the photo shoot when the building was finished there was 100 photos taken? Doesn't mean you have to include all 100 photos on the website case study. It could just be that there's just 4 or 5 photos and that's enough. And as you say, resizing them, and there's various kind of tools to do that.
And thinking about how your customer journey goes, because if someone's they're browsing around a few firm websites, seeing who they might want to engage. When they land on your homepage, that auto-playing video at the top, they don't even know what you're about, or sometimes if you're in the right city or anything yet, that's not the place. But once someone's gone into a few pages on their website, and if maybe it's when if they start looking into the case studies in your portfolio, they're obviously quite interested, and that's where a video where you can feel what it feels like to walk through one of our buildings might have a real impact on them. They've sort of expressed an interest already, and that's when you can start reeling them in with all these extra stuff. But the 0.5 seconds after they first landed on your homepage and just trying to read what your firm is called is not the time for that video. There's no point. So it's I know it's in small firms, it's sometimes hard to have that detailed kind of knowledge if there's often a one-person marketing department. But to the best of your ability, deploying the heavier stuff at the most crucial time just makes it worth it.
Makes sense. I would say as well, Molly, that your website, despite the fact that there's only 4 or 5 photos on the whole site, it's a great site. It's really effective, like straight away, like even down to things like the difference in like the size of fonts, the wording that's used as well. It's got just enough copy in there, but it's got it packs a punch of with personality, and it's just really good. And like you say, it's a very efficient website, but it's very effective, and that's something that a lot of us could learn from that. So definitely go and check out Molly's website to see just a great example of a sustainable website that's live.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm in the cushy position of, because people want a website, and often they want to work with a person. So kind of foregrounding my personality through words works for my business. So it was an easier job to make it a smaller carbon footprint, because I'm not an architecture firm that has loads of videos and stunning photos of big buildings. So it was kind of easier, but it's also quite a good... So part of the reason why I don't have loads of photos is I haven't splashed out for a big branding photo shoot, partly because my job isn't that visually interesting. Like it'll be photos of me smiling, looking at a laptop, which, I haven't quite thought, oh, that's worth, spending $2,000 on or whatever. So actually, I've got some lovely photos that, in fact, a previous guest on this podcast, Ange Lyons, took of me with a very nice camera in a travel lodge and cut the background out, bish, bash, bosh, I'm ready for our website. So I kind of, because I didn't have a lot of, visual assets, I went with a kind of text-led design. And then, people say they really like it and it's effective. So actually, the point of saying that is it's a nice lesson. And if people are thinking, oh, if I make it sustainable, it's going to be really restrictive and I'm not going to allow to do any of my creative ideas. But as, creative people, you'll know that sometimes actually within constraints, that sometimes is where like the most interesting things are created. So it don't need to feel like it's a constraining element to have a kind of sustainable lens on things, but maybe just go into it with an open mind of actually, if we're taking this as an opportunity to make our user journey more efficient, to look again at how lean and impactful the website can be, but also some like creative idea that might make you stand out from the crowd might come out of it, because they, a lot of them, the big lovely picture of a building you've designed, and then a lot of them do look quite similar in an industry.
I was just going to say actually that there's an opportunity to actually do something that does look very different and stand out, because that is the generic architecture practice website. It's very image heavy, lots of photos of like finished buildings and all of that, but actually some of the content that somebody that's actively looking for a practice, that's getting ready to make a purchasing decision, like a lot of that content isn't necessarily what they're looking for anyway. Like they want to know about working with the practice, what the process is like, the nitty gritty of how much do you charge and why do you charge that much and what's included and what's the right level of service for me, and that doesn't require having a big image and video heavy website to do that. A lot of that can actually just be done with words, the right words.
Yeah, that's a good point about, again, your poor one person marketing department needs to be aware of this. But if you talk to your current and previous clients, why did they choose you? And that might give you a good, that's sort of, I'm not trying to tell the marketers how to suck eggs, but that can give you a good indication of what should we be foregrounding. If you've got such smooth processes and they had amazing communication the whole way through and they felt like they were in safe hands, and even when there were delays that they were informed and everything felt not stressful, that's a huge thing that needs to be right in people's faces when they go on their website, because I'm sure that's not always the case. And obviously you need the pictures there because people want to know, do their buildings look awful? Or have they done anything nice that I might have seen? That kind of thing. But yeah, the reason that people choose you, the visual might not come first, and communicating what you do really, really well might have be a bit more impactful to have front and center on your website.
Having implemented some of the tips that you've shared, Molly, so if the listeners are like, great, I'm going to change hosting platforms, we're going to strip out some of the rubbish off our website to make it leaner, but just as, if not more effective than it was before, do you have any tips on how to tell people about this, how to communicate what you've done as a business in terms of sustainability and the improvements to your website?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's a bit invisible. As I've said, like the awareness that digital things even have a carbon footprint is quite low in general. And so in terms of how much kind of kudos you get for doing these things from your potential customers and customers, it's not necessarily huge. And yeah, it's also, like I said, you could have the exact same website and have it hosted somewhere else, and you've slashed that footprint, but nothing looks different. It's not as obvious as if, a sort of product-based company changes all their packaging to brown cardboard. It's really big, with a green leaf on it. That's a huge sort of visual signifier of, oh, this brand is more sustainable. Whether they are or not might be another question. So that is kind of a tricky thing about how you communicate it. Something I didn't mention, which is actually a good place for people to start, is to actually calculate what is the footprint of your website now. So there's the main calculators I use is websitecarbon.com and something called Digital Beacon. It's an estimate because there's so much involved in measuring the impact of one action or one product, but it's a kind of rough idea, and then that's your benchmark. So if you make the improvements, you can measure it again, and they're both rough estimates, but if it's a much lower rough estimate, you've done something well. So Website Carbon, they do have a little badge you can put, if you want to put that in your footer about how many grams of carbon that website uses. And then it is a tricky, I guess, whatever your normal comms channels are that you're telling people, is to just talk to people and maybe be kind of quite transparent about the process, because a lot of people don't know about it. So that would be quite a helpful thing to put out into the world, of saying, oh, we realized this was something that wasn't so great in terms of sustainability in our business. Here's where we started. We did these things, got these people to help us. Maybe it was me. Here's the finished result, and be like, yeah, our website still looks amazing. We're really happy with it. But we know that every time someone clicks on a page, it's, doing less harm. So if you've got a company blog or newsletter, sort of showcase it there. Anywhere else on your website that you're talking about your sustainable practices in terms of building, then, talk about it there as well. But it's not necessarily something people will notice very much unless you really do talk at them about it.
Yeah, I think though that that in itself makes it actually quite an interesting thing to talk about, because the fact that it's something that a lot of people might not be aware even exists, that it's even a thing, actually gives you a really interesting talking point that if you do, if you have a presence like most of us do as business owners on social media, or if they have an email newsletter or any channels that they have to talk about what they do, to then bring that up and say, hey, like, did you realize that like websites have this digital footprint? Like, did you even know this? And we didn't. And then we've discovered this, and this is what we've done as a business to do our little bit, because this is what we believe. This is what we're all about as a sustainable business. So I think that could be really, really kind of interesting, potentially quite powerful posts that people could put out there.
And going back to what we're saying about differentiating yourself in a bit of a homogenous landscape, that there's a lot of architecture practices, doing the same thing, presenting it in the same way. There might be a lot of them that are saying we're sustainable, but if not many other people are talking about it, then that's another point of difference that you can be, look, we're so good at this, we even have a sustainable website, and here's what that means. It's just something else you can use should be that, hopefully my sort of niche won't exist soon, and that'll just be like how we make websites. A sustainable architecture shouldn't be a niche. It should be just how we make buildings. And so hopefully it won't be a point of difference. But right now, get on board before everyone's doing it. And then it's another way you can stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. Get ahead of the curve. Molly, what would be the main thing that you'd like everyone to take away from this conversation today?
I think probably just the awareness that our digital world isn't invisible in a fluffy cloud and is a physical thing that is using a lot of energy, and then to tell someone else about it, because just spreading that awareness is probably number one step we all need to do before you get to any of the website stuff.
Cool. And was there anything else that you wanted to add about the topic that we haven't already covered in the conversation today?
No, I don't think so. I think we've done a pretty good job.
We're done all right. I think we've covered quite a bit there. Well, Molly, I like to kind of wrap things up with a non-topic question. I love to travel and to discover new places. Admittedly, I don't actually travel that much or that far compared to my backpacking days many years ago. But it leads me to ask, what is one of your favourite places and what do you love about it? This could be anywhere, it could be near or far.
Well, it's a UK-based one, so if you're not going far, you might want to travel. This is me and my son's new favourite place as of last year, is called Tywyn in Wales. There's a steam railway there that the guy who wrote the Thomas the Tank Engine books used to be a member and volunteer at and base some of the trains on. So we went to visit it, and now we've become volunteers. We've been back again and we're going back again. And it's just a little town. So there's a beach, lovely steam railway. There's a cinema that has table service and just a nice little town and a lovely steam railway with all friendly, keen people volunteering and keeping it running. So obviously steam trains are powered by coal, but that's my line in the sand. Let's de-fossil fuel everything except any remaining coal we've dug up. The heritage railways are allowed to use it, is my stance. So I can't believe I just recommended something that runs on coal as the end to this. But it's a nice town. It's a nice town in Wales.
Well, we'll let that one slide. We'll let that one slide. As you say, there's already plenty of coal that's been dug up.
Yeah, that's for the trains.
Yeah, that's for the
websites.
That's right. Yeah. So, Molly, I've really enjoyed the chat today. Thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. Could you just remind everybody again about your newsletter and how they can sign up for that?
It's super short and people find it useful and funny, and sometimes there's a quiz. On average, it takes about 101 seconds to read, and that's actually out loud. So in your head, it's even quicker. So it won't hang around in your inbox taking up energy and never getting read. And to sign up, it's mollygetsit.done.com/sign-up.
Brilliant. And if people would like to connect with you online, where would be the best place for them to do that?
LinkedIn. It's the only social media I use because I'm cool.
Oh, well, I'm not going to argue with that point. And I shall make sure that we include a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as the link to sign up for that newsletter. So thanks again, Molly. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next time, I chat with Mel Barfield about how to be luckier in your career. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.